We wanted to start out with today, and then we're going to go back. So if you would start out by telling us your name, just a little bit about who you are and what you are doing today. I think you work at UW-Milwaukee, like just some of the things that you are up to.
Okay. My name is Alfonzo Thurman. I'm currently a professor of administrative leadership at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'm also the director of the Research Center for Urban Education Leadership Development.
Okay. So I have a bunch of questions about your UWL experience, but maybe before, like right before getting to UWL, I was just curious. I was listening to this speech that you gave when you got your award, and just wondered if higher education, if college, if that was always an attainable goal for you. Like, did you always know you were going to go to college?
No, I didn't believe I was going to go to college. That was something that my high school counselor convinced me that I should do. I'm not sure what I wanted to be when I was in school as a elementary school student. I do remember that I was pretty good at as a student, and in middle school or junior high school back then, my 8th grade history teacher told me that I was a really good student. I should run for student government, and my social studies teacher told me that I should go to college. And that did kind of make me curious as to what going to college would be like, and why it was important to go to college. And so it kind of stuck with me. And as I was looking at high school and thinking about high school, I talked to my older brothers about college, and I found out that my sister, my oldest sister, had gone to college, but she got pregnant and dropped out. And so I did have someone who told me about college. And when grades came out and I started to pay attention to that, I had good grades. And I got to high school, and they put me in a vocational track. And I had A's and B's all the way through my junior high school, and my big brother went up there and along with my mom and talked to the principal, and they put me in a college track. And from there on, it was fairly smooth sailing. And I decided to go to college, and had a couple of scholarship offers, and chose to come to UW-La Crosse.
Okay, that's a great segue to my next question. So, why did you pick UW-La Crosse?
That was actually fairly interesting. It was, I ran track, was pretty good sprinter, and UW-La Crosse had a track coach named Jim Brown, and he had worked some with the 1964 Olympic team. And there was one black family living in La Crosse at the time who had several children who, a couple of the boys were good track athletes and had become coaches, and one worked with the Racine Park High School track team and convinced a good friend of mine, still my best friend, Darrell White, to come and take a look at UW-La Crosse. Well, it was Wisconsin State University at that time, to come and look at the track team and to look at the university. And we both liked it. And so we decided to come. And they had also a really good English program at the time, although I was thinking at that time about the elementary education program, but that didn't work out too well.
And so when you said you decided to come, what year was that?
That was in 1965.
Okay. And so in 1965, once you arrived here, could you recall roughly how many African American students were on campus?
Oh, I can remember exactly how many there were. There were 3 black students. And so when we came, we had the largest black student freshman class at that time. And there were 11 of us. There were 10 guys and 1 girl. And those other 9 guys ran that 1 girl away after the first semester. And I say the other 9 because I had a girlfriend at home, so I wasn't thinking about her at that time.
Okay. When we met in the office that I work in, I was talking about the climate and just whether people feel included, safe, like they belong here. And I'm just curious, in your opinion, what was the climate like for students of color in particular during your time here?
It was not good, on campus or off campus. I can remember, well, there are a number of things that I actually remember very well. On campus, one of the things I remember, the first week on campus, was walking down the hall and overheard this guy talking about, telling this other guy about him having nigger lips. And that just stopped me in my tracks. And so I went back. Actually, I just backpedaled, and I looked in. They were in the room, and I just went back to see who was in that room. And I didn't say anything to him. I just looked to see who was in the room, and I just kept walking. And later on that week, these guys were down in the lounge, and the same guy said the same thing to the same guy apparently. And we were watching TV. And so I did go over and I told him that was not an appropriate thing to say. I don't think I said it that nicely though. And he called me a nigger. And I'm a pretty cool guy. I don't get angry too easily, but I did get angry, and I told him not to ever use that word around me, and it was not an appropriate thing to say. And so, those kinds of things happen. We did. Actually, we became pretty good friends. And then off campus, on the very first day that I was there, or here, I kept in shape by running distance. And I was out jogging, and I bet you I wasn't a block from campus. And there was a guy out on the lawn and was talking about, wanted to know why I was off campus. He said he knew I was from campus and why I was off campus. And Another few blocks down, another person wanted to know, told me I should stay on campus where I belong. And it was that type of thing. And those types of things happened throughout the first couple of weeks that I was on campus, letting me know that I didn't belong in the community. I should stay, since I was on campus, I should stay there. And so.
Do you feel like, again, we were talking about our hate response team and just having an outlet for reporting things. Did you feel like there was any outlet for you at the time to talk about these things, or to have to not be alone in addressing them, as far as just on campus, like offices or people? Just like when stuff like that happened, was that something you had to deal with on your own, or could you go somewhere?
Oh, I talked to the dean of students at that time. Didn't feel like much was going to be done about it. Was told that, you know, you can expect some things like that, and stay out of trouble.
This isn't one of my questions on here, but when you talked about some of the things that you heard or were called, the N-word is something that I feel like comes up a lot in some of the hate bias incident reports that we have been receiving through my office. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. Like, are you surprised that that is still happening, that people are still being called that?
Around here, no, I'm not at all. I think I should be, but for some reason, no, I'm really not surprised. I don't think people change that much, and unless there's a real change of heart in a geographic area, no.
So you had talked about going to the dean of students at the time, and I guess my opinion of what you said is that that didn't sound very supportive. Were there any people on campus that you did find support from, or were able to see as mentors?
Yes, but it was not until I had changed majors. Well, that's not quite true. I went and I talked to my English teacher, Dr. Wooling, and I didn't go to talk to him about that particular subject at the time. I was writing an English paper, and I was having some difficulty. And he asked me if there was something else wrong. And I said, yeah, I was having some difficulty in the residence hall. And he asked me what that was. And so I told him about the name calling and just the use of the word nigger. And he said, well, let's go and over to the student union. I was in his office at the time. And so, you know, we went and we talked about it. And he was, you know, I don't remember the full conversation actually, but it was nice to be able to talk to somebody who understood and was at least willing to have a conversation about just the fact that you were uncomfortable in the environment. Which was nice, and that's actually the department that I found some camaraderie on this campus.
Great. One more question about the language. and then I'll move on. But I know in some of our the conversations that I'm trying to facilitate around campus, there's a real disconnect for some people about, I think, just some of our history and the impact that some of the language can have on people. And I'm just wondering if you can speak for yourself, like what that did to you, what it meant to you to be called that or to have to hear that then, or I don't know if you'd have any different thoughts now if you were to be called that, but just the impact, if you can somehow explain the impact of having to hear that.
I mean, it's so demeaning, you know, and I've always thought very highly of myself. My parents taught me to be a very strong person, to feel that I could do anything that I put my mind to do, and that there's no one else any better than me. And then to have folks to try to make you feel less than, I mean, there's just an anger sometimes that comes over you, and you know that the fighting part isn't the answer to it, but then what do? You know, there were times when all I wanted to do was just strangle the person, you know, and but then I never thought of it this way at that time, but the Christian in me didn't want to do that either. And so it was just this hurt that was just pervasive, and so to deal with it, really, I just wanted to be by myself, and oftentimes that's what I did. So, and I still get that way if it's really that hurtful.
Well said, thank you. Okay, so this is kind of on a completely different topic.
All right.
I'm curious. I heard that you met your wife here.
No, we met back in when she was in. Well, we were both in junior high school.
Oh.
We were childhood sweethearts. Yeah, in Racine, Wisconsin, and we got married while we were in college. And she was actually in Eau Claire. She went to school in Eau Claire, and we got married, and she came here because I refused to go to Eau Claire, you know, so she had to come here.
Okay, so, and when you say she came here, like she came to school then here?
She came to school here, yeah, in 1969, right.
Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to some of that.
Okay.
What about, back to UWL, is it true that you were here, had helped to start the first African American Association?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about just what that was like to be a part of creating something like that?
Okay. Yeah, we had talked just a little bit ago about when I came, there were 3 black students here, and 11 of us came. And the 11 of us agreed when we came that we would each recruit 3 additional black students, each of us. And we did that, or we tried. So the next class that came in was somewhere around 30. That following year, sometime in the spring, we talked about having an organization. Madison, I believe, was the first campus to have the Wisconsin campus to have an Afro-American association. And it was either Eau Claire or La Crosse that had the next Afro-American association. And I think we were the second. And so there was a group of us that got together and talked about having an Afro-American association. And I spearheaded that discussion, and we formed the organization in the spring of 1967, and we formed it that following fall. And I became the first president of the organization. Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. So I don't know if, I guess my assumption, I'm not sure if this is right, that currently we have a Black Student Unity organization,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just assuming that that is something that, I don't know if like just names have changed and evolved over time, so it's the same thing, I would say, right?
Yes, I think the name changed like three different times. After I served as the president for 3 years, Dave Brown succeeded me as the president. And I think they became the African American Association after my last term, because there were discussions during my last term as president. And someone gave me a call. I was at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh at that time. And they asked me something about, I forgot the name just that quickly, started with a U, that something about an organization here that was I wish I hadn't said that, but I can't remember, because now I can't recall the exact name. And they were asking me if that was the same as the African American Association that I had started, and I said I didn't know. But I know that the name had changed several times since I was here. But
what did it take to implement and to start that organization? I mean, was it just a discussion and then the discussion was over and the organization was born? What processes did you have to go through, and was there any struggles?
After our discussions, I went and talked to the Dean of Students, and the person in that role at the time was Dr. David Hogue. And he put me in touch with the director of the Student Center, and there were forms to be filed, and I completed those forms along with, we had elected a secretary for the organization, a vice president for the organization. And so between the three of us, we completed the necessary paperwork and had filed those with the director of the student union and the dean of students office, and so we did all the appropriate paperwork, and we had a meeting with the student. I forget the name of the organization, but there was an organization that approved all of the student organizations. And so whatever that protocol was, we went through that and had the organization approved. And so, yes, there was a process that we had to go through. It took a full semester in order to get the organization recognized. But that was a process that every student organization had to go through.
Was there an advisor, and what kind of programs did you do over your 3-year period that you could remember?
Okay, we had to have an advisor. Dr., well, he wasn't a doctor at the time, Mr. James Lafke was the advisor to the organization for all of the time that I was here. And I think he was afterwards for a long time as well. So, and I believe Dr. Parker became the advisor after Mr. Lafke retired.
And what kind of programs did you do?
Oh,
Let's
see. Oh, my goodness. In 1969, it was right after my wife and I, after we were married and came back to La Crosse, we formed a Black Cultural Center. There had been a cafeteria that had been vacated in the Cartwright Center, and we had been asking about some space for the Afro-American Association to meet in and to have some space. We were looking for space. There, other organizations had claimed space in the Cartwright Center. I was also a member at that time of the Alpha Phi Omega Service Fraternity, and they had space, and they just claimed space in the union. And some organizations had rooms in the Cartwright Center, and we were looking for space in the center as well. And they said there was no space. And so we were roaming the Cartwright Center one day, and there's this vacant space. And so we went and talked to Dr. Hogue and Mr. Dr. Mullally, who was the director of the center at that time, and said, "What are you doing with this space?" And they said, "It's vacant cafeteria." I said, "We know. We'd like this space for the Afro-American Association. We wanted to start a Black Cultural Center." Surprisingly, he said, "Fine." And so we started the Black Cultural Center, and one of the nice things about it is the organization, the Afro-American Association, we got together and we talked about what we wanted to do in that space. One of the first things we did was we held a Black Culture Week. It was a type of festival, and we had poetry reading, we had African dance, and one night we had the readings, we had a play, we invited in speakers. Val Phillips was the primary speaker at one of those events. I remember I did a reading. We had various people reading parts of a fairly long poem. That was our first year that we did that. One year we invited Bill Russell in to speak. We had a big crowd for that. And then we did something that probably wouldn't be allowed today. Brazilian and I, my wife's name is Brazilian, and I went to Dr. Mullally and asked if we couldn't put artwork up in the Black Cultural Center, and he said yes. And we asked if we could use a university vehicle to drive down to Chicago to get art from the DuSable Museum. And we had called the DuSable Museum. Brazilian can talk you out of your shoes if you allow her to talk to you. And she talked to the curator of the DuSable Museum. And surprisingly, she allowed us to come down and take extremely valuable artwork from her museum, bring it back to Crosse. Didn't cost us a penny. We had no museum, insurance or anything, and allowed us to take this artwork, bring it back here, put it up in the Black Cultural Center, keep it for months, take it back down there and exchange it for more artwork and put it in the, I'm telling you, it was just fantastic. And I know today they would never allow you to do that type of thing, but she trusted us to do that. And it was just it was a real different time then. And we did that for, what was it, 2 years, a year and a half or so, 1.5 to 2 years that we did that. So it was just, it was an amazing time. And we enjoyed it tremendously. Even when we weren't bringing in big name speakers and things, we brought in nice crowds of people, and it wasn't just us, you know, kind of thing, and it was very nice. And so we gained support over those years for the types of things that we were doing, both from the students and from the faculty and administration. And so things did improve from my first year, which was, for me, was fairly traumatic. But I think getting engaged in some of the student organizations helped, and learning the campus. Like I started on my, for me, I worked on the yearbook. I became sports editor my first year. I ran track, got involved in some intramural basketball, things like that, which helped me to not just stay in the residence hall and things like that too. So.
I have 2 questions connected with this, and then you can go on. One is, now, when this was taking place, this is pre-Black History Month.
Yes.
So what times of the year would these activities be taking place with the organization? So that's one question. Then the other question is, in relationship, when you were in those positions and you started the organization, that was during the time when the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy had occurred. Can you also share what was the demeanor on campus and what happened on campus, or if anything did?
Oh, wow. Yeah, those were some tough times. We actually held a vigil around the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a time when the Black students did get together, and the white students as well. And we came together to have a conversation, and there was a lot of crying and concern about what would happen on our campus around that. I know the Racket covered the newspaper. The Racket covered those events heavily, quite heavily. at that time. That was true of the Kennedy assassination as well. The student government organized both of those events, and the African American students turned out well, which wasn't always necessarily the case, and spoke out. Dorothy Travis took a big role in that. Trying to think of the Deborah Hatchett, young lady from Philadelphia, as well. Darrell White and myself. Will Samuels, who was from Jamaica. I know the five or six of us. Yeah, we were all very concerned about that, and I was trying to think of and that was most of that activity took place down in the main part of the Cartwright Center, and there were marches that were held during both of those events as well. Mm-hmm. And there was actually some good support from the president's office for that. It is important to note that many of these programs that I've been talking about happen throughout the year. They're not related necessarily to a specific time of the year. We've tried to make sure that all of the programs are offered throughout the entire year.
Can you talk about your knowledge about the creation of the Multicultural Center, which eventually ended up being Minority Affairs and now is called the Office of Multicultural Student Services?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know the specifics of the Multicultural Affairs, but I do know that the work that was done around the African American student organizations, and the led to work with the American Indian student organizations, the Latino student organizations, and that there was an effort to pull all of the work with the various ethnic organizations together under one roof. But I don't recall exactly when all of that occurred. I had moved on to, after graduation, to work at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and had started at least to my knowledge, in 1971, the first multicultural education center in the system at Whitewater, and that was supposed to have been the model for the system. So I don't know when all these others began, but it made sense to me that we would do that type of thing, and all of us want to be recognized for the work that we do, and I think it's a healthy way for us to organize ourselves and the work that we do.
Okay, so I'm going back just a little bit. When I think about the African American Association or Black Student Unity, it's changed names. And I just think that you said that was in 1967, and it's the year 2014 right now, and to see that, at least I've been here on campus for almost 10 years, and I feel like that's it's such a strong student organization. Like it's has a great presence on this campus. It's a great outlet for a lot of our students. They do awesome work, and so it's just really neat. I feel like that's such a huge legacy that you have left here, that you started something that is still sustained and going really strong today. And one of the things in Campus Climate that I've been trying to do with the help of some other people is just collect some of this information, some of this history of our trailblazers, of some of the progress that we've made around diversity and inclusion, and try to give credit where credit is due, but also have our students and some of our employees just be able to see that change is happening, because lots of times when you're here you don't get to see it always, you know, it's maybe happening but it's just so slow, and students are only here for 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, and so to come here, they don't always see it. And so I've been trying to create this timeline that shows, like, you know, maybe you're not seeing it like right now, but it's happening, and you may be being a part of it, and here's what happened before you, here's where we're at, here's where we're going. And so I guess, and I don't know if this might be too broad of a question, but I'm just wondering, similar to you starting that African American association, I see that as a legacy that you have left here. Are there other legacies or accomplishments that were made during your time here, whether like you were responsible for them or you were just here when they happened?
Wow. I don't know, because I didn't know I was leaving a legacy then, you know. No, I can't think. Actually, I can't think of anything. All I know is that we were doing our best to make our lives meaningful while we were here. And as Truman Lowe and others came along, they wanted to do the same kinds of things for themselves as well. So I can't think of anything right now.
That's fine, and that's kind of a big question, but if you do, even just after we're done here, think of anything that, and maybe I can try to show you all the timeline that we're still working on, but if you can think of something like, wait a minute, this happened, and it's not being captured, you'll definitely have to let me know.
Okay, we'll be glad to do that.
Okay. So you still working in higher education. I'm curious if you can speak to any progress that you believe systems of higher education have made around some of the things we were talking about, around diversity, around inclusion, access, opportunity. It could be specifically for students of color, but or any marginalized population. Just what progress do you feel like we're making?
Well, at least we're willing to talk about it. In my teaching now, I talk a lot about, and the students have to talk about research issues that we face in higher education around access, around, well, particularly access, and what is keeping young people of color from getting into higher education today. I don't think the rates of access is where they should be today. We know poverty and the whole economic issues that people of color face is, to me, horrendous today. They're not much better than they were back in the 1950s and 60s. And we haven't done much as a nation to address them, and we have to. And so we're looking into the reasons behind that and how we're going to change that for the future. People who have money still can get into college. That's the way it was, 60, 70, 80, 100 years ago. And if you look down that line for another 50, 60, 70, 80 years, it looks the same. And what do we do to change that? And that's part of the research that I'm looking at and the team of people that I work with are looking at. And we have to make that change. And Michael Jackson sang that, and we're singing it still today.
Perfect. You answered my next question. I was going to ask you what hasn't changed. How about...
Do you need tissue? You can keep that.
No, thank you.
Okay, okay. Thanks. What, and you can help me out, Thomas, because I think this was kind of one of your questions, but we're just wondering, what are some things that remain with you throughout your life that came from your UWL experience, whether they're life lessons or just things that have shaped you for better or for worse?
Yeah, qualities, attributes.
Oh, I think my wife would support me in this. I've always been stubborn. But I found a way to kind of channel that, one of the things that I learned from my experience here, I started out wanting to be an elementary school teacher. And in my first course here, my elementary education instructor made a comment. I had been working on a playground in Racine and working with young children in the mornings, and worked with some around their reading skills and things like that. And I used comic books to help them with their reading instead of them just playing all the time. And she told me that that wasn't a way to teach kids to read. Well, they were at least trying to read, and we would sound out words and things like that. And I said, yeah, they were at least trying to read. And she kept insisting that that wasn't a way to teach kids to read. And I told her, I'm not a reading teacher, but I know when kids are trying to read. And she kept insisting that I didn't know anything. And I know what I know, and I know that there was the stubbornness coming out in me, that that those kids could learn, and that this was an appropriate means of teaching. Yeah. And so I got up and I walked out, and I never went back. And I think that was the best thing that that I did. I followed my own instincts on that, and I went and changed my major to English. It was the best thing I ever did. And I love writing. I enjoyed the faculty here who were very supportive, who allowed me to find my way with some guidance on what good writing is, what good instruction is. They taught me how to teach in a way that was natural for me. They gave me an opportunity to get on a radio show and talk about civil rights issues, something that I was passionate about, to write about African Americans, to teach African American literature, and and my first teaching was with Mr. Lafke, who had the first black literature course on this campus. And so be able to do that, and he was passionate about it, and have someone who is supportive of you in doing those kinds of things instead of saying you can't do that was important. And having that kind of support on a campus that at the beginning said you can't, basically, was fabulous. It's the reason I like UW-La Crosse. It's the reason I'm willing to come back to do these kinds of things and to do what I can to support the students who are here today. I don't know if I answered that question or not, but I answered what I wanted to answer from it. But if there's something else that I missed, I'll be glad to do that too.
I think, were there, during your time when you went to school here, were there any African American staff people, faculty people, administrative people during the time here?
No.
Or any people of color?
On staff? In the
Staff,
faculty or
staff?
staff? No. No.
What would you say to a young man or woman that's already going to school here? I guess I would put it in two categories for a person of color coming to school here. What would your advice be to them, even knowing that it's 2014, 2015? And would it be any different for a white student?
Advice about coming here?
Yeah.
I think you can, I think UW-La Crosse, if it's has the same types of supports that it had when I was here, you can make it. But you have to be willing to be willing to get out and find somebody who will work with you. And I believe there are people who will work with you here. And I believe in most places you will be able to find somebody who will be able to, or who will be willing to work with you if you're willing to work with them. And you have to really make the effort, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there too. And you have to be honest with yourself, you have to be honest with them, and you have to take the chance. And you can get your feelings hurt quick, I think, if because you can be vulnerable, and if you're vulnerable, you can get hurt. But yeah, it's possible.
Do you think, you still work with students, do you think today's students are different than students when you were in college? Just like either attitudes or resilience or just in any shape or form, are they different today?
Are they different? say yes. Yeah, I think they're different. I think they see the world differently. They've been exposed to a lot more of the world. I mean, in the mid-1960s, you didn't get to see what was happening around the world. You knew that little slice that TV offered you if you had a TV. Most of which was black and white even then. And so students are much more worldly today. I don't know that they're as resilient. I don't know if they're as tough. But they certainly know a lot more. And, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily good. And I was going to say they're smarter, but they're smarter in in the amount of knowledge that they could have, can't have, and how well they utilize that knowledge. You know, is yeah, I think it's the thoughtful piece of it that I'm really thinking about. I don't work with undergraduates that much, but the ones that I have worked with really, really good, really good. Really good. Yeah. Wouldn't mind having them. I want them as my grad students. Yeah.
I'm curious if, and maybe you won't be able to answer this, but if you could say more about, I was just intrigued when you said I don't think they're as resilient or as tough, and
Yeah.
I guess in what ways, or in what ways, and also if you have any theories about why do you think that is?
I don't know why I say that. I just maybe because I see the drugs and alcohol tearing a lot of our neighborhoods apart, and the ones who don't go that route are the ones that I say are really. Those are the students I see making it and are doing so well. Those are the ones that I really want as my students. But so many are falling by the wayside, many more than the ones that I get to see coming into our colleges and universities. And the reason I don't think they're as tough is because too many of them are falling prey to the drugs and the alcohol, abusing not only themselves but others. You know, that's one man's point of view.
Thank you. Okay, so going back to you and your experience here, when you reflect back on these years, is there anything that you would have done differently? Like when you think academically,
Mhm.
personally, socially,
Mhm.
anything, if you could actually come back to that time that you would do differently?
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't have. I would have studied even. I would have studied harder, drank less, and got done quicker. 5.5 years. That's too long. But I was having too good a time during those last 3.5, 4 years. You know, I was pretty good the first year and a half, but after that, I kind of went on the wild side. But yeah, but that would have been it. I had a great time, you know, but I did some stuff that I could have taken back. Yeah, so but. That helped make me who I am, though. So I'd be somebody different if I did it otherwise.
I have something. In regards to education, with you being an educator and knowing that you went to school here, which kind of began your college career and when you finish your college career, a combination of things. I mean, why is education important, you know, not only to yourself throughout your lifetime, but also for others who maybe don't have it or people who are going to come in the future, particularly for people of color?
Why is education important? Well, when I was coming up, my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters stressed the importance of education, and business opportunities didn't seem that clear cut, that you had those opportunities the way you do today. And education seemed like if you had an education, that you could have a good life, you could influence a lot of people, that you can make a good life for yourself and your family. And I had always liked the idea of teaching. I always thought teaching was in the public schools, but I actually thought the instructor here did me a great favor because I don't think I necessarily wanted to teach young kids anyway, but there's another stream of teaching, and that's young adults and adults, which I find much more enjoyable. And it allows me to do something that I really do enjoy. But I've actually spent more time on the administrative side, and I enjoyed that a lot. And so I got to do two things that I really enjoy, and influence a whole lot of people in quite a few different ways, both on the administrative side, making things better for people of color, getting in, having access to education, because I started out in the educational opportunity programs, working with the multicultural education centers, education opportunity programs, moving into the deaning piece, working in provost office, then running schools and colleges of education, and then becoming a professor. And I said, what better life than that? So the education piece, like I said, it's not just the public schools, but the university setting as well. Fabulous life. And I think I've influenced a number of people to work those same areas, and they affect a lot of people as well.
I have one last question, then if anyone else has questions, you can ask. And I didn't have this written down, but
That's
I'm just
all right.
thinking as I'm talking to you, so hopefully it comes out coherently. But I'm listening to you, and I think, like, just how, and you may not think this, but because you said, I didn't know I was leaving a legacy, but it's just so incredible to be in your presence and to hear everything that you, the things that you went through, the things that you were part of creating, the things that are still here because of you, that although I think we have a long ways to go, I came into a place that was better because of you and people like you. And I'm just wondering what, it's maybe similar to Thomas's question about, like, what would you say to young students, but what if there was a way that students who are currently here, faculty, staff, could thank you through our actions, like, and maybe using a somewhat of a track metaphor, like you pass the baton to us. How, like, if we could continue that work, show gratitude in some way for you and the people who came before us and did such great things, what would that look like? What would it be that you could see what's happening here and say, thank you for continuing the work that I'm doing, I see it, I'm proud, because here it is, or here's what it looks like, here's what it sounds like. Does that make sense? So just like what can we be doing who are here, the people who are here right now, what could we be doing that would make you proud of us the way I feel, like, just so proud of you and everything you did for us?
You keep on doing what you're doing and make it better for the people who follow you. I mean, I think the work that you're doing, that Thomas is doing, and assuring that the center and I mean the building that you're in, the offices that you have, where it's located. I mean, I would never, ever have imagined that you all would be where you are with the staff that you have, the kinds of programs that that you provide to students would be here because of what we started, those many years ago. But making sure that that is available for future students and the services are increased for those students, and that students of all races and ethnicities come to a better understanding of our people and the needs of our folks continues to increase. I think that's the best thing that we can do for UW-La Crosse. Thank you.
Anyone else have some questions or things they want to make sure we capture?
Since you're here, can you share a few of the things that you've done outside of your job per se, but in the Milwaukee community or even in DeKalb, just your community work, It's probably all linked to our jobs, just so people can know.
One of the things that I'm most proud of, I think, is working with our church in DeKalb, Illinois. We established the first African American Baptist church in DeKalb, and we started basically from scratch in a when I went to DeKalb, I met a guy who's a great friend who ended up being the pastor of our church, and named Leroy Mitchell. And we started talking. We started our job on the same day, and I didn't hire him, which I thought was a travesty because I've always hired my staff. But I was hired in as the director of special projects, and he was hired in as the director of the Chance program, and it's a program that gives students of color an opportunity to come to the university who didn't meet the academic standards of the university. And there was an upward bound program, the Chance program that Leroy ran, special services program, another EOP program. And then I started a tutorial program for actually the entire university, but it was originally geared to the Chance and Upward Bound and Special Services program. And but we, the directors of these programs, and I got together and we started talking about there not being a Black Baptist church in DeKalb. And he had been a deacon. He came from New York, and he had been a deacon in his church. He'd been a choir, sang in the choir and stuff. And we had sat around talking, and I told him one day that he should be a preacher. And he said, no, never. Never say never. And the director of the special services program had said the same thing to him, unbeknownst to me, prior to my saying this. Anyway, long story short, he ended up being the pastor of this church. And he had asked me, this is years later, we had all gone to separate churches, and Leroy and I and Brazilian and his wife had all joined a church up in Rockford, since there was no church in DeKalb, Illinois. And but eventually we rented a church after we all got together and said there should be a church. We rented this church in DeKalb, but decided that we wanted to build a church in DeKalb. And years later, we started to talk about how we were going to finance a church. And we'd gotten plans together and everything, and he asked us to kind of co-chair a fundraising group, Brazilian and I, to do a fundraising, serve as fundraising chairs, and I chaired the overall general planning group. And we started doing the fundraising. Brazilian did a fabulous job of talking with a realtor about property. And we looked at property. We looked at churches that existed, and we couldn't find anything. Leroy would go and look at anything. We drove up to a couple of places. I refused to get out of the car because I said those places are death traps. I'm not going in that place and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, he asked, we started looking. We found some property thanks to Brazilian and the realtor. And how long did it take us before we started to build on that property? 5 years?
4 years.
4 years. And we got an architect from Chicago who developed the plans for us, and I agreed because I was looking for a job. I had become dean at that time at Northern Illinois University. I changed jobs 3 or 4 times inside the university, and he said that he needed me to stay until the church was built, and I was ready to look for a new job, and I wanted to be dean somewhere else. And the deanship at UWM had opened up one time prior to that. And I was interested in that job. Brazilians and my parents were in Racine. Milwaukee is close to Racine, and we were thinking about getting closer there if we could. But like I said, I was interested in another job. I wanted to move and do something else. And he said, you can't move until the church is built. And he said, will you promise me that? And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then I said, yeah, I'll do that. And lo and behold, the church got built, and what job opened up? It was the UWM job. And then at that time, I didn't think I wanted to go to UWM. But the dean from Ohio State became the chancellor at UWM, and whom I liked a lot. And she kind of courted me to become dean at UWM, and I applied, got the job, and went there. And it was right after we got the church built. And that's how I got to UWM, and it was great. It was great. That's something that I just loved, that you could, but it just shows God was looking out for us. And that was something that is just amazing. But it got me into being able to work with the Black Male Initiative to create a center when UWM was saying that they weren't going to create any more research centers unless they were all vetted and had some connection with business and engineering. My research center has nothing to do with business and engineering. And it also got me connected with the Boys and Girls Clubs, which do a lot of work in the neighborhoods of the poor neighborhoods in Milwaukee. And so those things are close to my heart and my work that I enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.